So we're, as always, CapMac, and looking at the state of things. Gives you a snapshot of how many members we have and where you can locate us on social media if you so desire. Welcome tonight. We're going to have a little bit of business here and some announcements. Then we have two short programs by Robert and by Nathan, followed by a get to know with Nathan. And then our feature presentation will be by Craig on entertainment evolution and how the pandemic has changed the way we watch media. Certainly everyone has been stuck at home for the most part of a year and certainly consumed a lot in a lot different ways than they had been. Our 2021 board is the same motley crew that we had here last month. Perhaps one of these days, not in the too distant future, we'll be able to get together and take Nancy from a fill-in in the corner to be part of the main group.
John, can I
Sir,
stick in someplace a urgent security message? It'll only take about 30
go
seconds.
for it.
Okay. Terry showed me this. On your phone, go to settings, passwords, security, recommendations, and it will tell you a whole bunch of things where your passwords have been hacked. This is from Apple. Terry thought she was in big trouble when she saw 8. I've got 286. And some of them are high priorities. Some of them are, they just think that my password's too easy to guess, or that they say other people are using the same password. I know that is not true, but some of these are serious because they're financial institutions.
Would you repeat that sequence? Go to settings on the iPhone and then
Settings, passwords,
okay.
security recommendations.
Okay, thanks.
And it doesn't seem to have an equivalent on the computer.
I have to rejoin.
Okay. Thanks.
I've got a green circle with a green check mark in mine.
I hate you, Don.
Well, I'm sure everyone's going to be following Tom's suggestion and looking, if not now, as soon as the meeting is over. So hopping back to things, and thank you, Tom, for sharing that. I think it's important for everybody to take a look at that and see that they're in a safe condition. Board meetings are the Monday before the first Tuesday. There's no easy way to say this. We can't say first Monday. It's the Monday before the first Tuesday. So if you need to join us, let us know. That's when we're holding them right now by Zoom. We have a number of appointed positions. Many of the folks that are filling these positions are continuing on from last year. We do have some positions that are open if someone wants to volunteer. June meeting was very good, was held on June 8th. If you missed it, you can find it on our YouTube channel. And as with all of the meetings that we have had since about a year ago, or a little over a year ago, when we started holding our Zoom meetings, we've been recording them and we have them on our YouTube channel. As always, we'd like your input on what we can do for future meetings. What topics would you like to have covered? What speakers would you like to have us try to get to come to the meetings and cover whatever it is they are an expert in? Just let us know and we'll see what we can do, which really says is we'll let Nancy figure out how to get the job done, since that's her current task. Help desk, we can continue to get messages that are help desk requests if you send it to president@capmac.org or enter something in Slack. But we started something new with tonight's meeting. We started the actual Zoom meeting at 6:30 instead of 7, so that people could come in and ask technical questions to our help desk team. So just as a little bit of feedback. What is the consensus of the group? There seems to have been several questions that were asked and answered. Should it be something we continue going forward before each meeting?
Yes.
I see some thumbs up in
Yes,
here, and
yes.
so it looks like
Yes.
that our help desk crew has a 30-minute extra job from now on at the meetings, more if we actually need it. So that's good. Now, as started a couple of months ago, I've been grabbing slides of charts and stuff. Let me just run through some of these. And if you guys don't like this stuff, let me know and I'll either eliminate it or filter it a little bit. But pardon me, I thought this one was interesting, showing our interest or inflation, I should say. And as the chart indicates, we are at an all-time high on inflation as of May. Doesn't sound very good for those of us who are retired on fixed income. Interest rates in a similar fashion is all over the place, but generally speaking, it's up. Consumer price index is also at an all-time high, or in terms of has grown the most here recently, I should say, from this slide. Oh, and one thing let me mention, when I can possibly do it, the title at the slide that identifies where it is from is a hot link to wherever that is. So if you want further information on this slide, you can get it there. So that would be right here, if you can see my cursor. This probably won't expect too much, but groceries versus eating out has changed a lot and spiked, or I shouldn't say spiked necessarily, but went through a large transition right at the beginning of COVID last year. Now it's coming back more to even. People are starting to go out more than they used to. A lot of things have changed in price, and this just kind of follows up with a consumer price index that some things are going up in price, some things are going down in price. You know, Clorox was at an all-time high when we were at the height of the COVID issues. Gasoline has been going up. We've had, on the other hand, a growth in the number of billion-dollar companies. There's been more here in 2021 than there has been in the last couple of years, and those have been accelerated above, say, 10 years ago. Interesting statistic. So these are looking at smartphones and home broadband and who has them and who can use them. As you can see here, the smartphone has been on the rise, unexpectedly. Broadband seems to be on the rise, but has been at a much slower level. Unfortunately, here in the States, we aren't getting the broadband coverage that some countries are. This kind of looks at smartphone and broadband, who has it by different groups. That follows up on the same thing. I got carried away when I was grabbing all these slides. They pop up and I just throw them in here. And then later I look at it and go, is there really something that's of relevance? But anyway, this is looking at shopping and the use of technology. You know, how have you used different things, self-checkout, augmented reality, biometric pay, and so forth. And as you might expect, age makes a big difference in who uses what. Likewise, when you look at augmented reality, who's excited about it? It's the younger folks that are interested in it. And if we look at who thinks they're probably going to be using it at work, again, it is more at the younger generations. iPhone versions, someone mentioned being back level on an iOS version earlier. iOS is pretty much up to date on most of the iPhones. The vast majority, 85% of people with an iPhone are running iOS 14. I don't think that that would be true if you looked at people who are using an Android phone. App prices are slightly lower for Apple than on the Google Play Store. We had a speaker not too long ago, Fozzie Bayman, that talked about 5G. And if you look at this chart, we are right about there. So you can see we're at the very beginning of a rollout of 5G and the impact on us as consumers as to what 5G is going to provide us with. Having an electrical engineering background, I'm always keeping an eye out about robots and new robotic advancements. I thought this was an interesting slide because you can see right in here where the US stands in terms of robot density and manufacturing. One thing that has happened during all of the COVID and the shutdown is robots have been making advancements in terms of placements in factories and in other operations much faster than they had before COVID. Simply a matter of companies can't get the workers that they would have liked to get the jobs done. Mobile browser market, i.e. phones and tablets, Safari has a remarkably large portion of the mobile browser market. Chrome coming in second, and then a whole bunch of others that also runs. Search engine market, we all know Google is the leader there. Personally, I use DuckDuckGo because of the privacy issues that they incorporate into their searches. But it's interesting to see how vastly larger Google searches are than any of the other contenders. Podcasts are something, I know I listen to a lot of podcasts. I subscribe to far more than I can keep up with, but how are people listening on them? Most are on smartphones and tablets, and that really isn't something that I would find surprising. That 25% of people listen on our desktop is surprising. I would have thought it would have been more on their mobile devices. Smartwatch shipments are something that are of interest too because of the Apple Watch. You can see here that nearly a third of the smartwatches being shipped are Apple Watches. I think we've had some questions in the past. How many people have an Apple Watch here? I suspect it's well over half of the crowd we have tonight. And as you can see here, the sales of Apple Watches has been going up over the last few years pretty consistently. Likewise, the number of Apple TV Plus subscribers has gone up. I think some of the free promotional plans have helped in that regard. It would be interesting to see starting sometime this year how that's going to look going forward, because they have curtailed the length of their free programs. I think it's now 3 months instead of the year that they were giving out before. Everyone buys apps, and if you look here, you can see the distribution of app categories on the Apple Store. And it doesn't surprise me that most of the sales are games, though there are so many other more useful things you can get to put on your phone, but that's where the sales is. And the last thing talks again about something I mentioned last week, and that looks at Apple versus Spotify versus Amazon Music users and how Apple is in the middle of that mix. So some interesting slides. Again, if I'd like some feedback later on, send me an email or something if you feel one way or other about those slides, and I can adjust. Now, going on, we need to talk about upcoming projects. Tom, do you have anything to talk about with regards to the picnic?
Yes. as I unmute myself. We are tentatively set for Saturday, the 9th of October at the Hyde Park Christian Church Fellowship Hall, which is where we've had the picnic in May, several years. Of course, we missed last year. We missed this May. It'll be barbecue from Pokey Joe's. Nancy has been diligently working on her trivia quiz. It'll also have tables where you can sell miscellaneous computer items or give them away or whatever you want to do with those. And we're on schedule. We got the place reserved. We have to do our own cleanup, but we've been doing that anyway, and that saves us $100. So, and
Tom, can you say the location again?
Hyde Park Christian Church. It's on 45th Street, if I remember right. Not too far from I-35. It's in Hyde Park, so that means it's west of 35. It's on the north side of the street, a huge parking lot. And as you look at the church, kind of go around to the right side and come in the right side. And
It's where we've always had it.
Yeah.
It's Hyde Park Christian Church, not Hyde Park Baptist Church.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Right, and it's between Red River and
Duval.
Duval.
Yeah.
Any questions for Tom?
Any new committee volunteers?
We could still use volunteers. Right now, Nancy and I are the only one on the committee, but I will be twisting some arms shortly. Oh, and if you're interested in paying dues,
I'm supposed to be on the committee too, aren't I? Or no, I'm with helping. Never mind.
Oh,
A reminder that families invited to the picnic.
yes, your immediate family is invited. We'll be getting a count closer to the time, since the responses to the email that we sent out, so many people says it depends on what the Delta variant is doing at the time. So we're going to be playing that part by ear, and we'll just do the best we can.
All right. Thank you, Tom. Hop back to my slides here for a minute. We've had Nancy talk about the HomeKit workshop for a while. It happened. The video for it is up now on our YouTube channel. Here's the link here, or just go to the YouTube channel and you can see it. Nancy, do you want to say anything about the workshop? And you are on mute.
I thought it was great. I've actually been able to automate things. So I thought it was very successful, and Jeff did an excellent job explaining why and how all this stuff works, so that it's easy to just follow the steps. And if you're interested in doing this, like automating your heat or your doorbell or your lights, then take a look at the YouTube. Anyhow, take a look at the thing, because Jeff really did an excellent job.
Yeah. Take a look at the video, and I'll warn you, it's like almost 2.5 hours long. So you may want to break it up into pieces.
Yeah, I've only got a chance to watch the first half myself, but the one I watched, he's doing a very good job on it.
And
Yes, it was really good.
there's also timestamps on that, so that it breaks it up into sections. If you're interested in a particular section, you might be able to find it easier by going to the timestamps on the YouTube video.
Yeah, thanks for doing that, Robert. That helps a lot.
Bill,
Okay.
Bill did it.
Oh, Bill did it. Well, whomever did it, thank you for it, because it makes a big difference in trying to jump in and find a particular section in the video.
Yeah.
And thank you, Nancy, for organizing this. I know you spent a lot of time working on it.
Well, I did, but it was so valuable. The one thing that I would recommend for people who are going to watch it, if you don't know where to start, I mean, you just don't have a clue how to do what you want to do, then don't skip the first part, because by the time you get through that, it's like, oh, okay, now I know how to do it. So that's just my recommendation.
Well, thank you, Nancy. All right, so now I move on to the program segments of the meeting. I'm going to hop through and show the three, and then we'll just turn it over to them to do in sequence. The first is going to be Robert talking about a shortcut script on connecting your AirPods to your iOS device. Following that is going to be a product review of AirTags by Nathan Lott. And Nathan is going to do the getting to know section this month and talk to us about him. Let me remind you that I'll be looking for future people to fill in this spot. So if you are interested, and I do have someone's in the waiting list already, but if you're interested in us getting to know you better in a future meeting, let me know and we can schedule it. And then finally will be, oops, that's the wrong slide. Finally will be Craig Gowens talking about the way people have changed their media consumption over the past year. So rather than me talk anymore, let me turn this over to Robert.
Here we go. All right, sorry about that. What I've got here is, I mean, most of the time when you open up your AirPods, they automatically connect to your iOS device, and there's usually not a problem. But sometimes when you have more than one, like if you have a phone and an iPad or what have you, sometimes you have trouble getting it to connect to the one you want it to connect to. So as I've said before, I listen to a lot of Kelly Gamont's, who talked a few months ago about on her podcast, and she was talking about a shortcut like this. So I built one. Basically, you take the shortcut and you connect your AirPods through Bluetooth to your, in this particular case, I'm using the phone. What you do is I'm going to try to go through and show you the different screens as you step through this process. This is the icon for shortcuts. It will go through and it'll show you all shortcuts, your share sheet and so forth. Basically just touch the all shortcuts. That will take you to a screen that will show you probably already have some shortcuts that it just gives you.
Everybody see your screen?
Is everybody seeing the screen okay?
Yes.
Okay. So what you do is you click on the plus up on that shortcut screen. That gives you a new shortcut screen, and you add an action by hitting, on this particular case, the plus, add action, and then it takes you over to an action screen. From there, in this particular case, we're going to choose media. And notice when you choose media, you're going to get a long list of stuff. So you have to scroll down in this particular case till you get to the section for playback. Once you're there, you'll notice there's one that says set playback destination. And once you choose that, then you'll get a screen, and it'll probably either point to your iPhone or your iPad, depending on what you're doing this on. And it will give you a screen that will show you all of the destinations that you can use for your playback destination. Now you'll notice on there that your AirPods aren't there. What you do is holding your AirPods close to the device, you open up the AirPods and they will appear in the list. Once you've done that, and you've chosen them, it will show that your playback destination in this particular case is going to be my AirPods. Now, at this point, you could just save this shortcut and it'll just connect. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add one more step to this, another action. And what it's going to be is I'm going to get it to play once it connects, it'll play a chime, just kind of like what the AirPods do when they connect normally. And oops. So you hit the plus to add the second action. I keep hitting the wrong device. And then you go through and you up in the search bar, you type the word sound. And by typing sound, you'll notice on the right there, it says play sound. So once you choose the play sound, just take the default sound. It's just a chime that it'll do. Then you can hit next and connect and give it a name, which I just made Connect AirPods. And then you type done and you will get a screen that says all shortcuts, and you'll see a shortcut that says Connect AirPods. Now, you might notice too that you can, if you use Siri, you can say, hey, Siri, connect AirPods, and it will go ahead and connect it through Siri. Or you can tap the Connect AirPods shortcut that you're seeing on the screen, and it will go through and connect that way. The other thing about all this is that it will, if you have both an iPad and an iPhone, that Connect iPod shortcut will show up on both devices. So depending on which one you run it from is what it would connect to. Right now, there's no shortcuts available on the Macs themselves, but once, from what I understand, once Monterey comes out, shortcuts are going to be available on Monterey, and I would assume that we'll start seeing our shortcuts there too. I know I went through this pretty fast, but what the deal is, I'm going to put this keynote and as a keynote and a PDF on the website once we post the video of the meeting tonight. So you'll have a link to go to, so you can, if you want to build that shortcut, you can follow it there. And I think that's basically it.
Thank you, Robert.
Any questions, or I don't know if I have many answers, but
I think it's great that we're showing some stuff with the shortcuts.
Well, and following that up, how many of you all out there have tried to write your own shortcut? A few. Looks like 5 or 6 of us. So that's good. I agree with Koki. This is something I hope we can do more of going down in the future meetings. Shortcuts seem to have a lot of twists and turns to them. And as Robert was showing, sometimes doing it is not obvious. It's a pick and choose kind of programming methodology that, as a former programmer, doesn't work well with me, but it is easy to start up and create something. You just got to start somewhere and play with it. I'm sorry, Robert, I cut you off.
yeah, I was just going to say I blame Nancy because I went to that video for the HomeKit, and I wasn't really planning on doing anything with HomeKit. And then the next thing I know, I'm trying to set up my thermostats and doing this various stuff with HomeKit, which has to do with shortcuts. And I started messing with them. And then I heard this thing on thing on the podcast. So it just kind of got me into messing with them a little bit. I still got a lot to learn, but it's been interesting.
Anyone else have anything to comment or ask Robert about? Then the program will go to Nathan and he can talk in whatever order he wants about his product review, or tell us a little bit about himself.
I'm going to go ahead and do the product review real fast. I'm going to be talking about AirTags. It was just released not too long ago from Apple. They're $29. They look like this. I got mine engraved with my initial, NL. And then this is what the back looks like. It's a little bit larger than a quarter. They're $29 or $99 for 4. I got 2 of them. One that I put in my wallet, just loose, and the other one I have on a cheap Amazon keychain. It is about $7. The Apple ones you get from Apple start at 30 and go up to 200 something if you get a Hermes. This is a $7 Amazon keychain. And so the way it works is that you have to have any iPhone that is running 14.5, iOS 14.5 or larger will be able to run it. So that means that you have to have a 6S or newer. And if you want the special feature that you may have seen in the keynote with the arrow pointing to where your device might be, then you need an iPhone 11 or 12. I have an iPhone 11 Pro, and so I'm going to bring that up. And you get to it. Well, first, when you take it out of the box, there's a little tab that is in between the back and the white front. You take out that little tab and you hear a beep. And then a little window will come up from the bottom saying, do you want to connect to the AirTags? And you go through the steps and you can name them or name what device you have them on. So you can have them, I have mine called Nathan's Keys and Nathan's Wallet. And then you get to it by going to Find My. And then if I tap on my keys, the best part, I think, is the sound. I'll see if the sound will come out in this on my microphone. Can you hear that beep? Mm-hmm. I think this works better than the little arrow, because you can kind of find things by sound, especially if you lose them within the house. But if you are within range, which means only like maybe 10 feet or so, 10 or 15 feet, because if I have my keys in the kitchen and I'm in my bedroom or my office, I'll just get a black screen saying it's not within range. But if I get closer to it, or if I'm moving around and I get close to about within 10 or 15 foot range, I'll get this green screen. And it says, as I bring my keys closer, it says that's here. Or if I throw them across the room, then I'll get an arrow showing where it is. And then I can go, as I move my phone closer, it tells me that I'm 4 feet away from my keys. Also, if you were to leave them in a taxi or on a bus, you would see on a map, just like you would with if you lost your phone or another device that you have Find My enabled with, you would see it moving around on a map. If you tap where it says Nathan's Keys, you get the serial number and the firmware. And so Apple's already updated the firmware twice, and it just updates automatically as long as your AirTag is near your phone. It will just update the firmware automatically. And so that is basically the AirTags. Are there any questions?
Nathan, are the batteries replaceable on the AirTags?
Yes, it's a basic C130, whatever that number is. It's a basic watch battery.
2032 or something?
Yes, and in the way you do it is you take your thumb on either side and you keep moving that back around until it pops off. And then you can switch out the battery, put it back on and go the other way with your thumb, and you'll hear that little chirp, meaning that it's back working again.
Does it let you know when the batteries are low?
I'll let you know if that ever happens. I just got
Good
them.
answer, Nathan.
Okay, thank you.
Nathan, you mentioned that if your keys were in the kitchen and you were in the bedroom and you were looking for them, so you were using your phone, but you got a black screen, would it continue looking for them if you just put your phone in your pocket and started heading towards the other end of the house and all of a sudden they came into range?
You would have to be looking at the Find My in your phone, and as you come into range, you get that little arrow that green arrow. But I think what works better is, and a little bit further range, is to play the sound, play the chirp. It's like when I have the ping my iPhone on the Apple Watch, and I love that if I've misplaced my phone somewhere, just to hear that dee 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 of where the phone is.
How long do you think the batteries will last, or the battery actually?
Watch batteries last a while.
Those batteries last a long time.
Yeah, I would say at least a year or two. I don't know. We'll see. All right. And then John asked me to talk a little bit about myself. So I started using Macs in high school. My first was a Mac LC. And then I got a eMac, a big white one that looked like the old iMacs with the CRT monitor. I also had a power computing when Apple went into clones for a little bit in the late 90s. But round about 2008 is I've gone all Mac Minis since then. I had a 2012 Mac Mini, and just about 6 months ago, I upgraded to the M1 Mac Mini. I have been a member of, and Eileen is here, which is nice. I've been a member of San Antonio's Mac Apple users since about 2002 or so. And then around 2008, 2010, around then, I joined CapMac. And unfortunately, in January, Mac Apple users had to fold because we just didn't have the membership. We were down to maybe 3 regularly attending meetings, and it just wasn't sustainable. So I'm full-time CapMac now, and I'm, as you know, I'm really into the Mac experience, Mac, iPad, iOS, and all that experience. I do a YouTube channel, youtube.com/Nathan Lott, where I talk about tutorials for Mac and iOS software. And sorry. And it's a passion of mine. I love playing with all these apps and software and Mac and Apple related stuff. So that's a little bit about me, and I will hand it back to John.
Talking to the muted microphone. Thank you, Nathan, for sharing that with us. And again, I'm looking for others to share a little bit about themselves at future meetings. If you're interested, let me know. So now we're up to Craig and his talk about our consumption of entertainment and media. So Craig, it is up to you.
All right. Keynote selected here to share. All right. Are y'all seeing the correct screen?
Yes.
Okay. All right. We're going to talk about how we've changed our watching habits of media in the last few years, especially thanks to COVID. Some of this will probably seem a little obvious, but I felt that maybe it was a nice kind of look at it over time. So we always hear about how everything has changed. We say it like a cliche. I mean, World War II, the moon landing, 9/11, how it changed everything. Well, that's not very helpful because change is the very nature of things. Nothing in society stays constant. The thing that things have changed should not itself be the surprising part, but rather the how and the why. And I think it's safe to say that COVID has certainly changed us, and in ways that we really didn't expect. So we're going to take a look at how things have changed in this meteoric shift over time, and how some of these trends that we've been seeing have accelerated because of the pandemic. But to get a kind of sense of perspective, I thought it would be helpful that maybe we should take a quick little reminder of how things have evolved since ancient times. And when I say ancient, of course, I'm speaking in internet years, because we're going to go back way, way back to the late 1970s and early 80s. The World Wide Web had not yet been invented. The internet was known as ARPANET and was not widely accessible or even available to people. Dial-up modem speeds for things like bulletin boards generally topped out at about 14,400 odds per second, which typically we even had smaller modems. I mean, I think my original one was only like 800. VCRs had not yet taken off as a consumer device, so most people did not have them. There were only about 16 million households that had cable TV service in the 80s, early 80s. So how is it that we consumed media at that time? Well, basically there were only two avenues for that. You had movie theaters and you had television. And really there was this wall in between them, that it was one or the other, that there wasn't a lot of crossover. I mean, you would have movies that you would see in the theater later show up on TV, but that usually only happened after many, many months or even years before you would get the opportunity to see it again. So in this pre-1985 era, to see the big feature films on the big screen, you had to go to the theater. And if you wanted to see it in color, because a lot of people back then, we didn't have color television. Network television was much more focused on having series, news, and sports as their sources of original content. They would occasionally show, of course, theatrical releases, but as I said, many months or years after their release. Networks would occasionally...
Craig,
Yes.
excuse me, Christine, if you can hear me, please mute your mic if possible.
So networks would occasionally commission these epic theater quality miniseries. When you think back to things like Roots or Shogun, the Thornbirds, or North and South, these were very epic multi-part, multi-night miniseries that Americans flocked to their TVs to watch because it was movie quality, but it was a much longer format than what you would be able to see in a movie theater. So it would be shown over multiple nights. And if you were one of the lucky ones that would live in an area that had cable TV, if you could afford it, you would be able to get more than just ABC, NBC, CBS, PBS, and any independent TV stations. But I mean, I know people that areas they lived in, they didn't even have all the big three, that you might only have ABC or NBC and not have CBS. So it varied greatly. Cable TV itself was rather limited. I mean, obviously it was far more choice than the big three and PBS, but you still did not see a broad range of choices to get those theatrical releases on your TV. Then, of course, we hit a milestone. People started buying these things called VCRs, and we started having places where you could rent VHS cassettes. So we're going to call this the Blockbuster era, and we're going to label it as approximately 1985 to the year 2000. Consumers could now start buying VCRs and recording content off their TV, or they could use a camcorder to record things that they wanted, home movies that would be in a better format, or they could buy content at the store. Blockbuster and other companies saw this as a new opening in the market and began offering rentals. They would establish brick and mortar stores offering customers what was theretofore an unprecedented level of choice in what media to watch. I mean, you go to those stores, you think back and it's like, my gosh, how could anybody ever watch this many movies? To compete, television networks had to start producing more made-for-TV content, the movies. And this started to chip away at that wall between theaters and television. And then the 1984 Cable Act deregulated the cable industry, and that made it much more easy for cable companies to set up business elsewhere. And it made cable television more widely available and more accessible in terms of content that they could connect up with. And you started seeing more niche type stations. You would have the Discovery Channel, the Science Channel, ESPN, HGTV. You started seeing that kind of diversification and specialization in the market. Then we decided that VCRs and VHS just wasn't cutting it. We wanted higher quality stuff. So we all started buying DVD players, and then we got Netflix. And this is a Netflix envelope. If you're not a longtime subscriber of Netflix, Netflix was not always a streaming service. We're going to call this the original Netflix era. So consumers, they began to be drawn to the higher quality of DVDs over VHS. And that's because we started getting very high quality traditional CRT televisions and these newfangled HD flat screens that were very expensive, but they had higher resolution and much better picture quality. This thing called the internet proved it wasn't a fad. We all started getting cable modems and replacing our dial-up service. And that became a faster way of connecting to this World Wide Web. And this little company called Netflix began offering DVD rentals through their website. You would log onto their website, you would create a watch list of movies you wanted to see, and they would mail you something from your watch list. And after you watch it, you mailed it right back, and they would send you another. We had this little thing called the iTunes Store available, where you could purchase movies or rent movies, but you had to download them first before you could watch them. You could not stream them yet. Cable television continued to expand the number of stations. Most people began to have offerings of over 200 stations from many different providers, including options for high definition. And to compete, theatrical releases would often be released much sooner than they would in the past. It used to be many months or years before a DVD release. I mean, you would think back how Disney would stockpile their stuff in the famed Disney vault before releasing it once a generation. Well, that stopped happening. They would release it much more quickly after it left the theater. And then we all started getting high speed and high bandwidth internet. And the theaters responded by having modern, high quality theaters. We're going to call this the modern Netflix era. And the end of it, debatable about when we pinpoint it, 2016, 2017, 2018, but it's roughly in this time period. TV screens started getting huge. In 2010, we had the first release of a 65-inch television. The TVs were getting smarter, and they were getting easier to connect peripherals. You think back of how we used to have all of those RCA cables and optical cables and everything. Now we had an HDMI cable that just about anything could use if you bought it recently enough, because it received near universal adoption. Internet speeds and bandwidth reached the threshold to support digital streaming of content. Netflix went from being the fastest growing customer of the United States Postal Service to the fastest growing source of internet traffic as it switched from doing DVD rentals to online streaming. Blockbuster went the way of the dodo. They had the opportunity to buy Netflix for $50 million. They passed it up and never recovered. New streaming services like Hulu and Amazon Prime, they were launched and started to rise in popularity, but Netflix, for the most part, was the only game in town for a long time. Cable television, 500 channels. That became normal. And they added on-demand options, so you could watch the movies that you wanted to whenever you wanted through your cable service. And this was a bid on their part to kind of fight for survival, because they saw how streaming was going to be changing the way that they did business. And movie theaters, in order to get their piece of the pie and not lose it to these larger televisions, they had to innovate with even larger screens in their theaters, with higher quality projection. They had to add amenities like alcohol and food service. Stadium seating was a big plus because we were no longer having to crank our necks up. We could see it kind of straight on. So they were trying to give customers and consumers a more immersive experience, that the theater was an experience, not just seeing the movie. And the reason, of course, was that home theaters, those TVs were starting to creep down in price and become much more affordable. Then we got streaming over cellular, and the number of streaming services just proliferated. We're going to call this the cord cutter era, from 2017 to 2019. Technically, we might still be in this post-pandemic. The TVs, I mean, they just became enormous, but surprisingly affordable. Just so you know, I just finished upgrading my TV to the largest TV that will fit in my entertainment cabinet. I paid $200 for a 43-inch TV. And I think back to what I paid for some of my CRT TVs back in the day. That just is flabbergasting to me that $200 43-inch TV. Cellular service reached speeds and bandwidth thresholds where watching a streaming program, a content on mobile devices, became popular and reliable. You didn't have the dreaded buffering. Streaming services became so widely available and diverse, younger people started dropping cable service altogether in favor of just a few streaming services. I mean, because all you needed was an internet connection. You didn't have to have the cable TV package of thousands of channels. Movie studios and media conglomerates, which had bought up the major networks, got spooked by the cord cutters. And they started seeing dollar signs in the maturing streaming market and said that, hey, we want a piece of that pie. So they started pulling their content off of Netflix. They started pulling it off of Amazon. They started pulling it off of Hulu. And they started their own streaming service or made plans to start their own streaming service. Because by 2019, some of them had not yet come to market. Netflix and Prime and several of the others decided, well, if you're going to start pulling the movies that we stream to our customers, we're just going to start producing our own content. So they were going to create their own original feature movies and series and miniseries. And consumers began to abandon physical media, the Blu-ray discs and DVDs, in favor of online offerings because streaming just made it so much easier. So the big networks, they all got led up by these huge media conglomerates, and so they're now all merged in together. So this idea of television and movies being separate took a big hit just by the fact that the networks became owned by some of these people that own the studios as well. And as a result of this change, we got a separate sets of streaming services. You've got Disney Plus, who owns Hulu and ESPN as well, and you can actually get those as a package deal now. For NBC, you have Peacock, and you had CBS All Access, which of course rebranded and became Paramount once they added more of Paramount's material. So we're going to talk about the second evolution of Netflix. First evolution was, of course, when they switched from being a DVD subscription service to an online streaming service. That gave them, the second one gives them two market-shaking innovations that generated enormous revenues for them and made the traditional studios jealous and greedier for a bigger cut of the marketing revenue. The studio solution was to try to starve Netflix of content. The studios wanted to keep the best content for themselves on their streaming services, and they'd just relegate Netflix to the B-level content. And you're still seeing that process occur, that every month you'll see stuff that leaves Netflix because the contract for that content ends. And oftentimes Netflix can't renew the high-level content because the studios want to charge an even higher price for it. And it's beyond what Netflix would be willing to pay. So this initiated their second evolution and third market disrupting innovation, a streaming service with its own studio to produce its own original content. Now, the studios, they thought Netflix was absolutely effing crazy for doing this, because you look at the studios and the amount of time and the amount of capital it took to build studios, the infrastructure, the equipment. They just thought it was crazy. They thought it was going to be the end of Netflix and that they would just be able to divide up the spoils for themselves. Yeah, it kind of didn't work out that way. Netflix has just been incredible in producing original content that people are interested in seeing. So despite the fact that all of these good movies have moved off of Netflix, people have held on to their Netflix subscriptions because they are still getting theater level quality out of the content that Netflix is producing. And of course, just before the pandemic hit, Disney Plus launched. This was ABC and Disney, their streaming service. And the day that it launched, it was in fourth place in terms of most subscriptions. They did a big push before it actually launched where you could pre-subscribe to it. And it was right behind Netflix, Amazon, and Hulu, which of course is already owned by Disney with over 10 million subscribers. Launch, it went okay. It was still considered a success, even though they had technical difficulties. A lot of people had issues with the content not loading because they were kind of shocked at how many people actually tried to access it the first day. And then there was a small hack where somebody was able to create a malware program that would capture keystrokes. And so they captured a lot of Disney Plus users' passwords and got access to their financial information that they used to subscribe. But despite that, I mean, all in all, it was still considered a success. By February of last year, so just before the pandemic started locking everything down, they had grown to 28.6 million users. And importantly, they had already had an immediate impact with their first viral sensation to grab attention on social media and have that effect on American culture. And by that, I mean Baby Yoda. You couldn't escape Baby Yoda for a few months when Disney Plus first started launching. Then, of course, it hit. The theaters closed down, and we all went into lockdown. Millions of people staying home. How do they entertain themselves? Well, movie production got shut down. TV production, no new TV episodes because they got shut down. Live sporting events, nope, they got shut down. The movie theaters themselves were all closed. So what was the solution that everybody turned to? Everybody started subscribing to more streaming services. Netflix added 26 million subscribers in the first half of 2020. Now, to give you kind of an idea of how big a deal that is, in the first quarter of 2019, Netflix had a small nominal loss of subscribers in the United States. They still grew internationally that quarter, but in the United States, they lost a few 100,000 subscribers. So the fact that they gained 26 million in just the first half was enormous. But that was largely fueled by the international market. They started expanding into places like India and China. And so international subscriptions accounted for 83% of those new 2020 Netflix subscribers. Disney Plus, year over year, from that February 2020 number of 28.6 million to February 2021, they added 66 million subscribers. And they have now crossed the threshold of over 100 million. And the total number of digital entertainment subscriptions grew by 308 million subscriptions. Now you consider each of those subscriptions is usually for a household. So we're talking more than 300 million people, perhaps by quite a bit. It's a 32% increase in 1 year. That's just unheard of. So this kind of gives a chart of one source that I found that shows kind of the growth of several of them and how overall the market changed over the course of the previous 2 years. So have you watched that? We started trying to find ways of getting more content because we had no new content. CBS's solution was to take older content they owned and controlled from back in their catalog, and they rebranded their CBS All Access streaming service as Paramount Plus by adding all of these Paramount movies. Peacock, they finally got their streaming service launched, And they introduced 3 subscription tiers, the lowest one being free with advertising. And they had a large catalog of programs from Universal Pictures movies and Universal Television TV series, some of it dating back decades. I mean, you could find stuff from television sitcoms from the 1980s if you wanted to watch them. Peacock now has over 42 million total users, and I use users instead of subscribers because there are a lot of them that are free, but there still are over 10 million premium subscribers, which is the tier that you don't have advertising in the content. This lack of new sitcoms and new episodes of existing shows drove people searching to discover or rediscover older shows, sometimes going back decades, on many of these services. And Netflix was the big beneficiary of this because they still had contracts on several very big programs. So let's take a quick look at the most streamed TV services series in 2020. Now, this is measured by the number of minutes that were streamed of these programs in 2021. Now, out of this list, this is the top 12 in that department. If you'll notice, 7 of the top 9 are archival. There are a couple of them that are still going on, or we're still creating new episodes, but this is measuring just the previous seasons that were on streaming services. So Criminal Minds, even though they were on like season 18, these were the people watching all 18 seasons, the 17 seasons before the current season. Same with Shameless. And the most incredible thing about this is 7 of the top 9 are archival. They're old series. And out of the top 12, 11 of them were on Netflix. So Netflix was a huge winner in this. Only The Mandalorian was not on Netflix. Now, when it came to movies, this was kind of the reverse because Disney, they ruled the market with the movies. They had 7 of the top 10. Netflix had the other 3. And if you're curious as to what the top streaming movie of 2020 was, it was Frozen 2. I can tell you for a fact that my 2 nieces probably contributed quite a few minutes to its streaming of Frozen 2. They were big Elsa fans. Now, all of this interest in older content, it had the studios now looking at, well, maybe let's do a reboot of that television series. That it's been out long enough that maybe we could just restart it with new actors and have the same sort of series of these long-run series. And one example of that is we had the Friends reunion episode, and we also are getting a reboot of Showtime's series Dexter. I tried to find a more comprehensive list of these, but because so many of them are still just in development, that they're not actually filming yet, the studios aren't revealing what they are. But you just hear the talk of it, that they are doing reboots on a lot of older series. Now, we also started seeing a shift, especially with Disney, to start developing things that were movies and starting to move it towards television type content. So as a result, we're going to be getting new Star Wars series, television type series, and more of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So coming soon to a streaming service near you, we're going to have Boba Fett. We're going to have a Rogue One prequel series. We're going to have a series on Obi-Wan, on a Jedi named Ashoka. We're going to have a Lando Calrissian one. We already have WandaVision, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and Loki released. They're still in the process of, I think, releasing episodes on the last one there, of Marvel movies that are now television series. And of course, Apple, they had to get on this too. They entered the fray with their Apple TV Plus service, which, like Netflix, right out of that started producing their own content. Some of it long format movies, others are short format series. Because of the pandemic, it shut down the production for the service just as it was starting to try to ramp up. So many of the things that Apple had planned couldn't get to market quick enough before the shutdown occurred. So they looked at their cash forward and said, okay, let's start picking and choosing to buy content to tide us over while we wait for production to restart. And they were very judicious in how they did this. Despite the fact that they have less content than the other services by a lot, they have garnered high praise for the quality of the content that is there, both the stuff that they do produce themselves and the stuff that they choose to buy and distribute. And so we have things like Ted Lasso and Hala and The Elephant Queen, Greyhound, which was a very good movie. If you haven't seen that yet, I would see that. The documentary Boys State. So there are some really good pieces of content on Apple Plus. If you have not an Apple Plus subscriber yet, I would really recommend it. Give it a try. Now, of course, the flip side of this is Hollywood was taking a huge hit. Movie theater revenue last year plunged from 11.4 billion to just 2.2 billion. I mean, that is a huge drop off. Movies that were in post-production were either going to be held back and rescheduled for release this year, or they decided to just go ahead and release them via the streaming service. And you saw them trying different methods of it. They would try maybe even a dual release model where in theaters that were still open in areas where the pandemic wasn't bad, they would release it in theaters, but then they would also release it on the streaming service at the same time. And so we're still trying to weed out what policies are going to stay and what policies are going to change. I mean, like Warner Brothers, they went full throttle and released everything in dual format and put it out on HBO Max at the same time that it was released in theaters. So another part of this is that, you know, that 6 months, how after 6 months it leaves the theater, you might be able to get it streaming. That's so much shorter. In fact, Warner Brothers has already announced that starting next year, anything they release in theaters will be available on HBO Max for streaming after 45 days. Now, you may think 45 days, that's pretty short. Well, Paramount is saying theirs will be as few as 30 days. So just over a month. And Universal doubled down. Theirs are going streaming after just 17 days. This is a remarkable change in the studio's behavior because they are still very nervous about people that they won't go back to the theaters. And this is their way of trying to preserve their marketing campaigns for their big releases. They don't want to spend all this money marketing a big blockbuster movie release only to have it fizzle in the theaters. They want to ride the wave of that just after that and get people streaming it as well. The other big victim of the pandemic has been physical media. It was already kind of heading down before the pandemic, but the shutdown really accelerated the decline. Content stored on physical media has just kind of fallen off a cliff. People are not buying DVDs and Blu-rays or renting them anywhere near as much. It stood at $14.9 billion, almost $15 billion 5 years ago. Last year, it's at $7 billion and is expected to decline even further. People are just not interested in having a Blu-ray disc that they have to keep track of. They find the streaming options to be far more useful and much more accessible in many places. If you're going on vacation and want to see that movie and you have it on Blu-ray, well, you have to remember to bring the Blu-ray disc with you. But if it's also showing on Netflix or Disney, you can log into your Disney Plus account while you're on vacation and watch it elsewhere, including on somebody else's TV. The picture quality, which used to be kind of the big driver of physical media, I mean, you could get a much better picture quality on those DVDs and on those Blu-rays it's no longer as much of an issue because bandwidth and download size of Blu-rays, you're not going to download a 40 gig Blu-ray style file. I mean, the quality, it's just not that worth that much. So consumers are kind of deciding that 8K and larger resolutions, they're not all that interested in them. They're content with having 4K and 1080p type quality. So this driving force is becoming less and less of an issue, and it's killing off the physical media. Then we have the cord cutting and the over-the-air stuff. Prior to the pandemic, cord cutting, it was basically a trend among young people. These were the people that were also ditching their telephone and going cellular only. What's happening now in the pandemic is that the older generations are following suit, which is kind of what they did with the cord cutting for the telephones. The young people did it first, the older people followed. We're doing it now, but people, they just can't understand why you would want to have 1,000 channels and you're not watching 900. But that's what the cable services are doing. And they charge a lot of money for all that. And even the smaller packages, you just don't get the bang for the buck. So it's shifted the demographic. And one of the downsides to doing cord cutting was always that you could no longer get your local stations. Well, over-the-air antennas have improved in quality and reception so that you can now get your local stations on an over-the-air antenna that even that you mount on your wall or mount on your roof. I mean, we're returning to the 1970s here with antennas. You can get those stations now without having to subscribe to cable TV. So we've got this question now because it's really becoming more and more difficult. Is it a movie or is it TV? That wall that used to separate these two things is being broken down. It's been kind of the major takeaway of the pandemic that there is no wall anymore. There's no difference between big screens and little screens because people at their homes, they have big screens. If you're watching on a 70-inch screen at home, why do you need to have a huge theater? So it's just, for the consumer, it boils down to, it's just content. It's not television, it's not movies. And the companies kind of drove this themselves. The media mergers that were meant to kind of control this process and delay or prevent any separation of or any merging of the television and movie markets actually led to its merger. The companies themselves, in trying to adapt to this, they started putting the same people in charge of both the television division and the movie division. So you had the planning being centralized along the same pipeline. It wasn't two separate pipelines anymore. And so that comes out when it's in the content. So the breakdown has even forced the award shows to adapt to this. It used to be that the Oscars, you had to have certain requirements for when you showed the movie, and it had to be in particular theaters in LA or New York in order to qualify for the Oscars. Well, they waived that this year simply because the theaters were not open, and they still wanted to have the awards show. But they're going to have to start reevaluating that again in the future because this line of distinction is just disappearing. And Netflix had already gone out of their way to go around this rule in the past by taking some of their content that is released on their streaming service, and they would actually broadcast it in a theater in order to qualify for the Oscars. So advances in production have means that we have these small studios now that can make made-for-TV format movies and television shows and achieve the same high level of quality with the standards for acting and cinematography and sound and special effects that we've come to expect from big features that are funded by millions of dollars that are put out by the big movie studios. And yet they're doing it at a fraction of the cost. I mean, you cannot, the budget for The Mandalorian is nowhere near what it would be for a full-fledged Star Wars movie. And yet it still has the same kind of cult following and the same level of dramatic quality in that smaller format. So the lockdown has forced people to consume media at home. And one of the uptakes of that is that a lot of us spent the last year upgrading our TVs. Some of us have gone so far as to create home theaters with high-end sound systems or screens. And so we're getting some of that big screen experience at home now. And as more people consume media on neither a TV or in a movie theater, but rather on our phones or our tablets, what really is the distinction between a movie and a television program? I mean, isn't it all just content? Is that what it's going to boil down to? But on the flip side, can home theaters really give us that same immersive and communal experience that movie theaters had? I mean, it used to be we would go to the movies with our friends and family, but you would also have all these strangers in there that were sharing this experience. And so, I mean, I can remember being in movies that the movie itself was just not all that great of a story, but because you were in this community setting with people reacting, it made it feel like a much better movie than it perhaps actually was. And in some sense also, it's because we're seeing this now in our home theaters rather than in the movie theaters, is this just another way that we're disconnecting from the others around us? We see that in a lot of places where people are more concerned with tapping on their phone than just actually calling the person or talking to them in person. So we have some areas that still haven't flushed out because we're not quite out of the pandemic yet. We're certainly opening up. The movie theaters are now opening back, but we're still not yet seeing if people are going to return to them in droves. If it is anything like vacations, right now it's difficult to find rental cars, it's difficult to find hotel rooms because people have been so pent up that they want to get out, that they're taking advantage now that the lockdowns are over. So we may see a return to that with the movie theater as well, for those that have managed to survive. So I thought this would be just kind of an interesting look at it. And I thought I'd open it up to maybe some questions or comments, and we can have a discussion about this. If you prefer, I can make it to where we can see all of this. There's my mouse. Stop share.
Hey, Craig, this Ginger. I'm just so impressed by your library behind you there. Some people actually read books during the lockdown.
Yes, I have on my iPad several that I read. Thank you, iBookstore, or bookstore, whatever they now call it. I think they dropped the I.
Audible.com.
No, I'm not on Audible. I prefer the Apple ones. I still actually read, not listen.
Public library as well. I get them from the library.
Yeah, it was nice at my old apartment because the public library was literally right next door. It was a nice, easy walk.
Craig, I remember being in Austin the first time I lived here, and we didn't have the 3 networks. We only had one because it was owned by LBJ, and they wouldn't let another one in. I don't remember which network it was, but we had one channel.
Channel 7, but they did have it on the upper tier because remember NBC and CBS in Austin are like 36 and 42, which you had to do, or if you remember the UHF and VHF knob on the TVs, you had to do that in order to get the higher tier once they became available. Yes, LBJ was the one that.
Yeah, before, Greg, before 1966, when KHFI, what was then Channel 42 came along, KTBC carried all the networks, and they picked and chose the shows that we got to see here.
Wow. That was definitely before my time.
Also,
you have to be of a certain age.
Yeah.
When did PBS come along?
In the year, I believe about 61 or 62, I think Tom would know.
Yeah, but I want to say that was under Kennedy that PBS.
Well, no, I can tell you because I was the video operator on the first broadcast. And they came on the air in September of 1962.
Wow.
I've heard a lot that many of the movies that are being produced now are no longer even bothering to consider film. Everything is
total digital capture.
So it's much easier for the smaller guys to, produce a movie with a lot less overhead.
Exactly. I mean, and that's the thing. It's kind of the democratizing part of this is that smaller studios can compete with the big studios, because if you have the technical know-how to do the capture and the post-production and the special effects, you can do it on a much smaller budget than what the old studios did. So, I mean, they actually kind of were a cartel for a long while, trying to lock out people with the technology. And as technology has caught up, the bottom has lifted up, but the top has not taken off much further.
There was a video shoot in our neighborhood, I guess about, I don't know, 3 weeks ago. And I was surprised, you could tell it's a typical, well, I say video, you could say film, but I mean, they were shooting a commercial, and you could tell because there were the talent trailers and the trucks with all the equipment and all this stuff. What impressed me was all the lighting was ARRI. In other words, ARRI, the guys that used to specialize in cameras and lenses, and they have moved into lighting because the red cameras are taking over the digital cameras, and so that's pushing. I think it's pushing them out of the film business to a large degree. I wouldn't be surprised if ARRI doesn't have digital cameras now or digital backs for their lenses and stuff.
ARRI cameras are some of the primary. The ARRI digital cameras are some of that probably at the top of the market in primetime TV production.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. I'd be surprised if they didn't do that. But I was surprised to find that they'd moved into lighting, and it was all LED lighting.
They've been in lighting. They've been in lighting for a couple, probably more than 30 years. So they make very high quality, albeit not inexpensive.
Yeah.
But it's very durable.
Really good quality. Another thing too to keep in mind is there's a push in the broadcast industry right now. Currently, all of our television stuff is ATSC, or Advanced Television Systems Committee, or you could think of it as ATSC 1. And there's a big push in the next 5 years to move everybody to ATSC 3, which is the emerging standard that'll move everything to 4K and then presumably to 8K somewhere along the line. But if you look at all the ancillary services that it offers, in other words, incorporated in the spec, they have multiple channel sound, which isn't that unusual, but they also have pay-per-view features. And there's a bunch of other stuff. And there's a back channel in the data stream that allows them to identify the viewer and what the viewer is watching. And it provides, in other words, you don't have to depend, what was the name of the company? There's a company that basically provided feedback on viewers.
It's called AC Nielsen Company.
Nielsen.
That's it, Nielsen. And you don't have to rely on those guys anymore. You can directly pull it up. You can get the back feed and actually figure out what your viewers are watching.
Another thing that's going to be offered, and because it's tied in with the internet so heavily, you'll be able to do your home shopping from your television.
Oh boy.
Well, I mean, we already search and buy our books that way through Amazon. If we still are buying books that are physical copies, that's kind of going the way of the Blu-ray and DVD as well. We expect to have our content. We expect to have it now. So for anything that we can dispense with the physical media, it's going the online route.
Yeah.
Well, Craig, this is Terry. Living in an area where we do in North Austin, there's no fiber here. You cannot download anything to watch on demand without fiber. The only way we see anything on demand is because I'm still hooked up to a cable where I can download the content that way. Because you can't do it. You'll just be interrupted. I mean, it'll ruin your evening. And who knows when we're going to get anything like that. So the model of it all going to be streaming is not a reality for a lot of people.
Well, I would think that it may not be through fiber, but even through coax and copper, you should be able to achieve speeds for streaming.
Not
here.
No, I had AT&T.
I think Netflix,
UVerse
for 4K delivery in Netflix, they require about 20 megabits of bandwidth.
No, not UVerse television, Craig, but UVerse internet. And I had 20 megabits per second download, and you can easily stream a high definition program with about 2.5 to 3 megahertz megabits download.
Yeah, you only need about 6 to 8 megabits per second to get good streaming.
I mean, 20 would be 4K level, and
as I say, I think Netflix says that they require about 20 megabits, for their 4K content.
That would be about right.
For 4K, perhaps. Yeah, I was just doing 1080p.
But then I think for normal high definition content, it's more the realm of 5 megabits.
Right. I mean, and that's the thing about Netflix is that they're able to dynamically adjust the stream while it's happening. So if you have something where you're watching something and it starts off in the highest quality setting, and your child is starting to stream something else on a different service, and it's taking up some of the bandwidth, Netflix can downgrade it to the 1080p version for you or the 720p version for you without it interrupting and creating a buffering, but you do, of course, lose the picture quality somewhat.
Terry solves the whole problem by having hundreds and hundreds of DVDs. You ought to see the piles of them here.
Well, I buy them so I don't have to pay to watch them more than once. I buy them so I can watch what I want to watch instead of being forced to watch what they're providing.
Well, and one of the things that I didn't talk about in this that I considered talking about, but I didn't want it to run too terribly long, is that the company that I used to do some work for, we've been working on a device that it is kind of like the all-in-one media device for home theaters. That basically it combines the ability to watch cable television, over-the-air television, movies. You can rip your DVDs. You can actually record streaming content. They have a patent on a process to record streaming content off of Netflix, Prime. So it's all stored on the device, and so you have access to it at any time. So you could actually rip the DVDs and not have to be worried about where that DVD is at, as long as you have the box. And they're eventually going to be opening it up to where you can stream it to yourself when you're out on the road, so that you don't even have to bother with it. So it basically makes it into kind of a Plex server as well. And the nice thing about it is you no longer have to worry about switching inputs for HDMI. It's just one cable, one remote, keyboard on the back of the remote, and you can access any streaming service out there. You can play internet radio, all of it. It's all in one place.
That available?
Yes, right now, probably not the price tag you're hoping for, given that this is for high-end devices. The people that are buying this right now are for their home theaters, and they're willing to pay the $3,500.
Yeah, sounds
for the
expensive.
low-end model.
Yeah.
We have several people that bought it for their yachts, because that's a problem on yachts, that you have no internet out at sea. So you can't get streaming. You usually can't get TV, but you can have recordings of movies. You can have ripped DVDs. You can have ripped Blu-rays. And so you put one of these devices on a boat, you load it up with content, and it's now accessible out of the boat.
I'm so glad to know what the problems are with people out on their yachts. It just.
Well, one of the other first world problems that I encountered working at this job.
This is not even first world. This is out of this world.
One of the customers, we have a timeout feature on it, so that if you don't push any buttons after 5 hours, 6 hours, it thinks that you've gone away, kind of like the Netflix will say, "Are you still there watching?" She wanted to override that because she sets it up in the morning, sets it to Animal Planet on a TV in one of her bedrooms so that her cats can watch it, because it's the cat's bedroom.
Well, that sounds normal.
First world problem.
Yeah. So the other options too are things like a Roku box, and there's all sorts of channels like Pluto TV. Talk about old shows that are available. You can watch Doctor Who. You can watch Mystery Science Theater. You can watch Norwegian trains driving through the countryside. It's really great when you're ready to go to sleep. You can just watch that, and it's very soothing. And this is like canned content that some smart person has found that it's open. I guess it's public domain or something, and they pay very little for it. And there's all these channels, and some of them are utter garbage, but
as long as you have the storage capacity and the bandwidth, it is very easy to set up your own streaming service. And that's why you're seeing a proliferation of them. So there, in general, is probably a streaming service out there for you. I mean, my parents, they discovered Acorn TV, which has a lot of British television shows. They love the British comedies, and so they subscribe to that, and they love it.
Can I make a recommendation?
Nathan?
Nathan?
I'd like to make a quick recommendation. Just Watch is a great app for searching out what is playing on the different streaming services. You can search for a movie or TV show, or see what's new every day being added to these services. You just choose the streaming services you have, and you get a list of all the new content that's added daily.
And the library has Canopy and Hoopla and other ways you can access stuff besides checking out their DVDs and physically watching them if you don't have all these connectivities.
Yeah, Just Watch is really great if you're trying to. I found some really obscure movies through Just Watch, and basically you go and you plug it in, and it tells you whether they're available on one of the services you have, for example, Amazon or Netflix or what have you, or it'll say, oh yeah, you can rent it through different outlets. It's really quite good.
There's another one called Yideo, and it is just the same sort of thing as Just Watch. It's called Yideo, YIDIO.com.
And it'll tell you, okay, it's on this streaming service, and this is what this streaming service costs, or you can rent it from Amazon Prime or what have you. And it keeps track of all that too. So those are two definitely things to look out for, because that's the problem now, is we have to have a directory of where the content we want to watch is located.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things is I think there's a bunch of obscure movies, and eventually what we'll have is a whole bunch of people that'll have digital libraries, and you'll either have to sign up, or you'll have to, sign up and be able to rent them, if you will, that kind of thing. I mean, it's all of the stuff, the physical entities will disappear into digital vaults, and, and they'll be, it'll just be all over the place.
Hey, Peter, why don't you mention that movie detective guy that finds very obscure films?
Well, I'm on a mailing list, and there's a guy, and what he does, he charges between, I guess, about $10 and $12 per DVD, and he has exceptionally obscure, I mean, European films that go back into the 30s. And you get on his mailing list, and he sends out a list I'd say about every 2 weeks. And it's nice because he'll say, oh, here's what's available this week directly, and he has a website, and you can look at the stuff on the website, and then the stuff in the mailing list, he'll have a pointer to the IMDb and like the IMDb listing for it, and you can go and see what it's about and get a synopsis and all that kind of thing, and it's really quite good. And if you Google, I think if you Google that movie,
he burns a DVD and sends it to you.
Yeah, exactly. It's a physical thing, so you actually get a DVD. But like I say, some of these things are extremely rare. I mean, I've found stuff on there that I was just like, where on earth would you ever find this?
It's one of the challenges of the streaming thing is that as the contracts renew, like some TV series will be like, oh, Amazon lost Doctor Who, and now HBO bought it out from under them. So you may have subscribed to a specific streaming service for a show, and then all of a sudden, oh, it's not there anymore, and now you have to either subscribe to the other service, et cetera, et cetera. And so you're chasing your TV show across different streaming services.
The name of the game is monetization.
Yeah. One of the examples of that is that Netflix last year, they had the contract on the TV show The Office that it could not be shown on Peacock initially because Netflix had the rights, and it was the #1 streaming television series last year. People just binge watched it over and over and over.
I think one of the
now
annoying
it's moved
things.
over to Peacock.
One of the annoying things about Amazon is when I got it some time ago, and I set up this whole list of stuff I wanted to see that was included in Amazon Prime, and then when you go to watch it, it's like, oh, it fell off the Amazon Prime list, and now you have to rent it, and it's like, man. Now, in that being said, they did add other stuff that was interesting, but you just have to watch out if it's available through Prime, you better go ahead and watch it right away, or otherwise it'll fall off the list. Or it can.
And there are several websites that try to track that, but several of them, they'll drop it off without warning. And it's just based on when their contract ends for that content.
I put the movie detective link in the chat if anyone wants to go see what kinds of very strange movies, and some of them are really quite good, but I don't know where you'd find them anywhere else.
Well, especially here in town where we used to have iHeart Video and Vulcan Video, and they were an excellent source, and both of those have cratered. So here we are.
All the more reason for people to buy the media themselves if they really love a show, and you don't have to pay to watch it again. You don't have to search any other download service. You have it.
Yeah, last week we were watching a movie in the morning. Really old movie in the morning, and we stopped and we went back in the afternoon and it was gone.
Yeah, I just had a great idea for a product. What you could do is have stuff that's only available in streaming, say in 4K or even 1080p, and you'd run it through this little box so it would make it look really crappy like it was on videotape, or introduce scratches and noise in the soundtrack and the little lines on the screen where it looks like there's dust in the gate on the projector and it scratched the film strip, and make it make it like it was in the old days, and like it'll stop from time to time and burn a hole in the film and and that kind of thing, just to make it seem like the old days.
It sounds like stuff we've seen on PubD Hub.
Those are available.
One of the more interesting filters that I've seen online is there's a website where you can type in a URL and it will demodernize the site to make it look like it was created back when Netscape was the #1 browser back in the late 1990s.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I found that one of the best sources for my music and movies are yard sales.
Yes.
I can get an entire CD of music for $1. We can find a movie for $1, and a lot of the old stuff we're looking for. Yeah, so I'm with Tara. I have a bunch of movies because I love watching some of them over and over again, and I can't always get them, and I'm not paying for every doggone streaming service. It's just
You
Yeah,
can really
also thrift stores like Top Drawer has a lot of DVDs and
Well, and that's
So
the,
does
the,
Half
the
Price
trade-off is
Books.
that if you subscribe to all the streaming services, you're paying pretty much just as much, maybe even a little more
No,
than
it's
you
more.
would for
It's
cable
more.
television. But
You're
the nice
paying
thing
more.
is that you have greater control over what you can watch.
Does anybody here in the group have any video CDs, those old VCDs that used to be available about 20 years ago?
talking about
Yes, I
VHS.
think I still
They-
have some.
Yeah.
I have a bunch of pirate ones that I got
V
in Taiwan and stuff.
VCDs. No, I don't remember that.
Yeah, they're really, they would
Yeah.
cram a whole movie on a CD and you have to see it to believe it. It's pretty
MPEG-1.
de-res.
I would compress it
Wow.
down to 700 megabytes because that's
Yeah.
all that could be held.
That's all
on a
you could put
CD.
on those.
Yeah.
And so the bit rate was usually very low for both the video and the audio.
Yeah, there was one I have that I really prize is a thing called SARS Wars, which is sort of the name's a ripoff of Star Wars, obviously, but it's about a terrible disease that comes from Africa that turns people into zombies, and it was shot in Thailand, I
God,
think,
how funny.
and it's really hilarious. It's just over the top. It's a satire, or not even a satire. It's just a comedy film, really. It doesn't sound like it, but it was, and it was ridiculously funny, but it was very low res.
Anybody still have any of the 12-inch movie discs?
Ooh. Oh, laser discs?
Yeah.
Oh, those laser discs, yeah. I see them. Where was I? I think at the Top Drawer, they had about maybe 20 or 30 of them.
I've got one.
How about those old things that I think RCA did, the CEDs, the capacitive, what they call those things? Capacitive. It was a video disc that you played with a needle, if you can believe it.
Didn't
I
last
remember
long.
hearing about that.
What
No,
about 8-track tapes?
I don't have any 8-track tapes, but we had them when I was growing up. They had terrible sound. I mean, even for the time, they had terrible sound.
So I just put another link in the chat. I don't know how many of you are aware of a Lifetime Learning Institute. It's sort of a very inexpensive classes in Austin, taught by volunteers, but there are a couple movie related courses in there. Of course, there's also, if you want to learn Spanish or know about traveling in Peru, or I mean, they've got all sorts of
Lifetime learning.
But yeah, it's I think their signups are going to be in the next couple of weeks. But we started I noticed the golden age of science fiction films is going to be offered again. It got cut off when the pandemic hit. We were watching that. There are a lot of interesting old science fiction films which you would not know about if you. The teacher really knows his sci-fi movies. So
Are these online classes?
No, they're in person.
You have to go.
Yeah,
they're in person.
I taught one of them.
Which one did you teach? On genealogy?
On genealogy, using DNA for genealogy.
Yeah, Peter and I taught one on Japanese visual culture, which was our excuse to show anime to old people.
There you go.
Probably
Cool.
need to mention Skillshare on the internet is also supposed to be a great resource of all kinds of classes.
Skillshare.
And Ginger, I thought I'd comment on your reference to yachters wanting video. There's a lot of sailing channel people that are not really wealthy, but travel all around the Caribbean and the world on boats that they're basically rebuilt, refitted themselves. They're basically sponsored by patron people and a few sponsors. And my understanding is there is some internet available worldwide through a rather slow connection and costs about $600 a month.
Yep. It's not anything you would ever want to try to stream something over because it's just way too expensive.
They use it for just emailing their family or whatever, updating them to what they're doing.
Right, and occasionally looking up things online that they need to look up. You wouldn't want to rack up, because I mean it's $600 plus usage over
Oh.
the limit.
Wow.
Yeah, VSAT is not very economical.
Is that at the Iridium network, or is that part of the Marisat?
That's a phone network. That's a telephone network, so it's limited, I think, to maybe 64 to 128K.
Right.
Oh, Iridium, the Iridium setup, because I think you can push.
Right, it's strictly it's voice oriented. There are some the satellite internet services, but they're expensive and slow, and you have a lot of latency.
Well, wait till Elon Musk gets through.
Well, and that's the thing. Those satellite constellations that they're trying to put up there certainly will cover greater coverage, but the question is, how long will that actually last? I mean, those satellites do have a lifetime that's going to be lower because they are at a lower altitude. And so you're constantly going to be replacing it. And I just don't see how that they can afford to keep doing that without charging more than what they're saying. Because some of them, they're saying they'll be free.
Isn't a lot of that junk going to start running into each other? I mean,
well, and that's the other
how
issue.
much garbage can we put up in the
amount
atmosphere?
of garbage that is now in space. I mean, anytime a panel on a satellite falls off, they have to keep track of the screw that comes out and is floating around, because at the speed that screw is flying, even though it is just a small amount, I mean, we're talking just a few grams, the fact that its velocity is so large gives it incredible amounts of kinetic energy. And if it were to hit the glass of the space station or something like that, I mean, it could literally crack through it.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, the space station goes over periodically, and you can get. I had a text. I think it's called Spot the Space Station. I just put the information tonight at 10:01. It's going over the Austin area. Did it also go? Hang on. Yeah, 10:01. So if you've got a park or nearby, you've got 7 minutes to watch it. It'll start in the southwest and go right over and go out the northeast.
And 58 degrees inclination.
Yeah, above the horizon. So that's kind of fun. It's not garbage. It's a space station, and you can, it's up just where the light is still, even though it's dark, the light is bending around the
sunlight. Yeah, it's illuminated.
The sunlight's up high enough that you see it like a bright thing going by, like a satellite or something.
It's pretty easy to spot, and it's really bright generally. It has a big bunch of solar arrays on it.
I've got the app on my iPhone, and it works really well, and especially alerted me to a time when, as it passed overhead, the shuttle was going to be disengaging from the space station, and you can see the two bright lights getting further and further apart.
That would have been something special.
Does it also keep track of the Chinese station?
It's not very big. I mean, I think the one the Chinese have put up is pretty tiny, really. Yeah, regarding junk in space, the space shuttle, one of the space shuttle, they came back down and they were looking at it, and they found about a 3/4 inch pit in the front windshield that was caused by a paint flake.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't surprise me. I mean, you think about how small a flick of paint is, but it's that velocity that because remember, in kinetic energy, the velocity is the square component times the mass to determine how much kinetic energy it has.
Yeah, it's scary. Well, the Elon Musk, what do they call that thing? Starlink. They're supposed to deorbit themselves when they run out of energy, but we'll see.
We don't want to see all 10,000 come down at once.
Well, boy, that'd be great. I hope it's dark. We can watch all this money flare off, out there.
Yeah, but promises like that get made a lot of times, and didn't really happen.
Yeah, put some strontium and some copper and some other things, so it's like fireworks, and actually get a nice display.
There you go.
So before we go too far more off the deep end here, does anyone have any questions specifically for Craig?
Craig, it was really great to have this
cool.
passing through time summary, because a lot of us have lived through it, but I didn't categorize it as, oh, this is when this bunch of stuff happened and this is when that happened. So thank you for pulling it together like that.
That
You
was
make
kind of
us feel
amazing.
much older,
fun.
Craig. I don't know what we're
Thank
gonna
you.
do.
I mean, it was kind of fun going through all that, of figuring out, okay, now when did this happen? Because that seemed like that happened about this time as well. And it was amazing how things kind of lined up and how you could really kind of define all those until you got to the cord cutters, because that I think is still nebulous as to whether
It's too
we're in the
close.
cord cutter. It's the pandemic has just shuffled things up. I mean, one of the things I didn't mention, for example, that the pandemic has accelerated, but was expected, is that we are no longer, the United States is no longer the largest market for movie watchers. It's now China. They were expecting that to occur anywhere from 5 to 10 years down the road. And the pandemic
it's
brought it
already
on
here.
just like that, because they did everything right in shutting down and we kind of didn't. So they were able to build more theaters and have greater capacity and have people still going to them. And just with their population increase, they passed us up. Which is also why you now see in a lot of Hollywood features, they are now including a lot more Asian actors because they don't want to offend people by not including people from other
People
cultures.
that-
So you
People that look
see
like
people
them,
like-
yeah.
Yes, so
Well,
you
there-
see Asian actors now getting more speaking parts, getting greater visibility.
I think Netflix has really caught on to that. There's an interesting series. It's an animated series with little short episodes called Love, Death, and Robots. And if you look at the end credits, it's got a bunch of. I mean, they have, if you will, dubbed it into probably about at least 15 languages. It's astonishing, and they come up in the credits. So obviously, this is a worldwide effort for Netflix. It's really interesting.
And they're short little segments, and some of them are humorous, some of them are thought-provoking, some of them are chilling, but they're, if you only have 10 or 15 minutes because you're going to watch something else or do something else, they're worth taking a look at.
Craig, do you see the streaming services losing at least a percentage of subscribers once we get back out and doing things?
I think that's
rather than having to
possible.
sit home every night.
I think that certainly is possible because, like I said, Netflix had started to stagnate a little bit in the United States because some people were really just wanting that A-level movies that were coming out in the theaters. That was how they watched them, was on Netflix. Some of them unsubscribed. But now that we're getting Netflix own content out there, that is attracting a different audience. So I think it's certainly possible we'll see some recession from the pandemic highs, but I think that streaming services will still continue to have a very high level of subscribership just because people have gotten used to having access to all this information and material.
I have a question about tonight's recording. When it's made available, will we also have access to the keynote that Craig spent so much time on?
If he sends it to me, we will.
Yeah, I think I can do that.
There's always that. Oh, that's just a lot of work. That was nice.
Well, that one was that's kind of a rush job, actually, because Nancy called me about, what was that, 3 weeks ago and said, Craig, we need a program. Can you do it? And I said yes. And
it was 2 weeks, Craig.
It was 2 weeks ago. Okay.
Wow.
And
It just felt like 3 weeks.
You did a great
coming
job,
up with
Craig.
a program title and doing the research necessary for it and putting the presentation together felt very rushed. So
No,
I'm
that was
glad
some
you
good
liked it.
research, though.
Nancy knew you could do it.
Yes,
It's
thank
like
you,
grad
Craig,
school
for that
papers.
effort.
Sometimes when you
Well,
put a whole lot of work
Awesome job
concentrated.
as usual.
I
It
think
was
the
beautiful.
problem is you were looking at all these things about films and you wanted to just stop and watch stuff and you didn't
Yeah.
have any time.
Well, I have a loaded up watch list on several. I mean, I'm a member of Netflix, Paramount Plus, Amazon, Curiosity Stream, and Sling. But I don't have a normal TV service for cable. I'm a cord cutter. I've got a digital antenna, so I can get the network stations that I want. But the streaming services I have, they do me just fine.
Any sports, Craig?
Oh, that's what I have Sling for. They carry Longhorn Network on Sling, so I have their sports package so that I can watch UT Sports on that. But they also carry ESPN and several of the other sports networks. So sports is about the only thing I watch live anymore. I don't even watch the news live anymore. I just have it automatically record on my device, and usually a few hours, maybe an hour or two later, I sit down, and that way I can fast forward through all the annoying commercials.
That sounds like a real nice way to do it.
Well, I remember that Craig didn't know if he wanted to move up to Washington. No, is it Washington where you live now? Anyhow, he didn't know if he wanted to move up there or not. It all depended on whether or not he could get Longhorn football.
Yeah, that's right.
That's pretty good.
We had a lot of discussion about that.
And I thought I was in trouble for a while because I previously had a streaming service called Sony View, which was how I had Longhorn Network, because at the time it was the only one that picked it up. But Sony View went away. It was one of the streaming services that did not survive because they had too few subscribers, and they decided they wanted to focus in on their gamers rather than their streaming service, and so it went away. But Sling had luckily
I
picked
think
it
I
up.
remember hearing about that. Yeah.
Well, my dog's telling me it's time for me to go to bed, so I'm heading off. Good
We've
job.
almost,
See you,
we've
Cookie.
almost
Good-
got a
that was
3-hour
good.
video, so.
Yeah, I think we ought to call it
It's
quits.
good.
John, just one thing. Let me announce next month's program. It's going to be Dave Hamilton, who's a favorite of a lot of our members, and the topic is going to be Plex.
What was it?
What's the
Going to be what?
Plex.
Plex.
Plex, it's a movie server. So it's a home movie server to where you can stream content to your friends and family if you give them access to it. But it's also a way of storing your content in your local device and on your local network.
Okay.
Yes,
Very good topic.
I've been using it myself for a couple of years. It's great.
You know, just a
Same
brief
here.
question. If you have a Plex server, can you record stuff from a silicon dust tuner? In other words, like I use ITV to do that, but ITV is being obsoleted by the move to Apple Silicon.
As long as you can find a way of capturing the video, you can add it to your library.
That's
But
a question
Plex itself
for me
does
to
not
ask
have a
Craig.
capturability.
Dave.
Correct.
You mean something like ScreenFlow, John?
Anything you capture and put in a format that will stream to the devices you want to stream it to. I rip movies, make MP4s, and put them out on Plex. So I can see them on my Apple TVs. I can see them on my iPad.
Whoever is MacBook Pro, please identify yourself so Heidi can put you in the drawing.
All right, I'm gonna turn the recording off.
All right. Thank you, Robert. And thank everyone.